Greetings and welcome to the Live Courageously podcast show. I'm your host, John Duffy, and this is episode 65. Live Courageously has been the conscious theme of my life for the last 3 years since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, and has been an unconscious theme for most of my life. Courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. And there is something contagious about someone who is courageous. So today is the Super Bowl. So today's show is counter programming for those folks who are not big football fans, but you can still watch the podcast from 3 to 4, and then you can watch the Super Bowl too. So that's how we are. Today's show is with my friend and guest, Skip Press. Skip Press has excelled as an editor, a ghostwriter, an instructor, a playwright, a publisher, a screenwriter, and a TV staff writer. He is an author or editor of over 100 titles, including several writers' guides to Hollywood books and 4 complete idiots' guides to screenwriting books. He's put together and edited the ultimate guide to video game writing and design, and he's also taught an online screenwriting course that was available in over 1,500 schools. He his co-created Ask a Screenwriter space on Quora.com, gained over 600,000 followers in a year, and his latest project is an ongoing journal on Substack called Chasing Twain, about how he became a pro writer and found and married someone he had known in another lifetime. That's the short version of his very unique and adventurous life that we're going to explore today. So with that, let me welcome Skip to the show. Hey, Skip, welcome to Live Courageously.
Hey, John, how are you, man?
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. And you know, you got a very adventurous life that I've been following on your Chasing Twain on Substack, and we're going to get a little bit into that. I'd kind of like to start with, I always like to ask 2 questions. One is, where did we meet? Where was the first time, if you remember, or somewhere in that thing? So we'll start there, and then I'll ask you the second question.
I think we met at the very famous, legendary Pineapple Hill Saloon and Grill in Van Nuys, California, where you and I and fellow compatriots meet on a monthly basis to plot the takeover of Hollywood. Is that?
and there's some truth in that, but or maybe a lot of truth in that. But at the same time, that's a great place, the Pineapple Grill. The owner of it is an amazing woman who stood up and fought against the attempt to close and destroy her business during the pandemic. So it's a great place to meet and to support her because she was courageous, a very courageous woman, and she did not let them shut her down, and she continued to fight back. So it's a great place that we meet there. And then that kind of leads to my second question is, what does Live Courageously mean to you?
It means it's the only way you can get through life these days. You know, I mean, there are people that are going off and being preppers, and they're going to move out of California like I contemplated doing, or they think there's nothing they can do about the government they don't agree with, or the economy's bad. My parents' generation, you know, they called them the greatest generation, they had to live courageously. They lived through the Depression. They lived through World War II. They lived through Korean War. And then they had to live through raising the baby boomers generation. so it was always tough.
You know? Right. That might have been the toughest part for them. So share with everybody, you talk about your parents and your grandparents. Where did you grow up, and where did you go on that journey that took you from there to California and Hollywood?
I grew up in North Texas in small country towns. My father was a football coach and a teacher. My mother, until middle of high school for me, was a housewife. You know, myself, 3 younger brothers. My dad had problems that I don't know if he got into fights with people or what it all came from, but about every 3 years we would move from one town to another. The second most popular religion in Texas is football. And if
you sure is second and not first?
Yeah, it may be first. Yeah. So,
And speaking of that, this is what we're missing because it's clearly not our most favorite religion. But
oh
go
my
ahead.
God, I'm not going to get to see Taylor Swift today. I can't.
I know
Stand it.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Only for you, John, would I would achieve such abuse, So, so
But
anyway,
like you said, so it was the second favorite religion was in Texas is football. So continue with that story.
yeah. So if you're a high school football coach and you don't win, then you are a denizen of hell and must move on. So that happened to my dad a couple of times and stuff. And then finally, when I was a teenager in high school, my mother decided a divorce was the best thing possible. Maybe not. So the last few years of high school were a little bit of troubling times for me. But when I was a kid, when I was 7 years old, I was crossing the street one day. It was autumn, and these leaves were falling, and a little wind blew, and I saw these leaves swirling in the air, just kind of magically. And I had this distinct thought: this will be an interesting life. So I was already looking at a whole lifetime, and at that point I started mentally taking notes about people and things and categorizing them. I had a memory that was better than just about anybody's all through growing up, and it's still that way. So I feel like I became a writer to some degree when I was 7 years old, and I was highly influenced by media. Songs on the radio. I remember seeing King Kong on a black and white TV on a screened in porch in the back of our house and just being mesmerized by it. So, and then as I grew up, my dad having problems, actors on TV that I admired greatly kind of became role models, surrogate father role models, like Jimmy Stewart, for example, and I got a lot of wisdom from that. Like there's a scene in an old movie called Shenandoah where Doug McClure wants to marry Jimmy Stewart's daughter, and Jimmy Stewart's interviewing him, and he says, well, why you want to marry my daughter? And he says, well, because I love her. And he goes, well, okay, that's okay, but do you like her? And he goes, well, yeah, I like her, but why do you ask that? He said, well, when I married her mother, I don't know if I loved her, but I liked her. And I liked her a lot, and I learned to love her, And so things like that really stuck with me. And when when we saw the only movie my whole family saw in a theater together was To Kill a Mockingbird. And it just had a huge impact on me. Atticus Finch doing the right thing no matter what. Racism was all around me to some degree in North Central Texas, or maybe slightly northeast at the time. And I never saw a reason to feel racist at all. But when I saw Atticus Finch and how, Tom Robinson dies and the injustice and all that, it just had a lasting impact on me. So I kind of think it was inevitable that I end up in Hollywood. I always wanted to write books. And then when the Beatles came along, then I, like so many other people, I got distracted and wanting to also do music, but when I got to Hollywood, I ended up meeting so many of these people that I'd seen on screen. And doing editing an entertainment magazine.
How old were you when you took that journey to Hollywood, and what was that like to make that a decision? Because that must have been a big decision coming from a small Texas towns to go from there to say, I'm going to take this journey, and we're going to talk later about screenwriting, the hero's journey. But what was that for you to make that journey? How old were you, and were you afraid? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was 23 and I got a job offer to be a writer for what I thought was an advertising agency in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And as my mother would say about hard times and getting a chance, glad to get it, and
Sure.
I was glad to get that thing. I had been living in Alabama. My mother had remarried. I'd been out there, and I kind of really got started on the spiritual stuff. I'd read the Bible all the way through when I was 12, just to find out what's going on. What's this really all about? And I decided I really wanted to live a life like Jesus. Well, the hippie times hit, and I didn't quite make it.
you got sidetracked.
I got a little sidetracked. So I was living in Austin, Texas, and I'd read about all these different religions. I wanted to solve the religious problems of the world, find out why all these religions fought with each other. Surely there's one way to do things that somebody's got to come up with, right? So that's how I got into Scientology, just by a fluke. And there was a little newspaper that the Celebrity Center put out and sent to Scientology places all over the place. In the back of that newspaper was an ad, and it was this company called Axioms Productions. And so I called them. I would just call people. I never had a problem on going up to somebody, introducing myself, knocking on a door. I called them and I said, I saw your ad and I've done a couple of courses in Scientology. So you guys are all Scientologists? Oh yeah. And I said, well, you need a writer. I'm a writer. I've been writing things. I haven't really sold anything, but I think I'm pretty good. And the girl said, okay, you're hired. And I was enough of an idiot, that I didn't even have a car. I was living in Austin, Texas, and I was going to be a writer and a musician. And that was a good time in Austin, to do that. Willie was there, Waylon was there. And so I came riding on the bus out to Los Angeles.
Well, it's funny, Skip. I kind of went through I dropped out of high school when I was 16, and I started reading all those religions. I read Dianetics. I read everything that was out there at the time. And like you, I was searching. It was that era where we were searching for answers. We were searching for what was the purpose of life, what is the meaning. And so I've read it all. Different things affected me more than others. But it was kind of that journey that somehow. You started in a different place than me. Obviously, I grew up in the South Bronx, but somehow we both ended up in the journey that took us to Hollywood. So keep going. So, you ended up following that, getting a job from them, taking a bus to Hollywood, and keep going.
Yeah. So I get out here and I'm like ready to write. I've got a little portable typewriter, Olivetti portable typewriter. I'm ready to write, baby.
I think we have to clarify that most of this people probably watching goes, what's a typewriter, Skip?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's this little machine, and and then you put paper in it, and it types little things, and then you pull a paper out, and then you put another paper in. So anyway, so I get out here, and I'm like, I'm ready to write, and turns out Axioms Productions was really all except the two people who owned it were staff members for the Celebrity Center. And they're like, well, we kind of got the writing taken care of, but we do need somebody to run the snack bar. And I'm like, okay, well, so I've got no money. I've got nobody to go back to. I can't hike back to Alabama. They weren't so crazy about having me around anyway, And so I just stuck it out, but cool things happened. I was cleaning the snack bar one day, And Anne Francis steps up in front of the snack bar and orders a milkshake. If you knew who Anne Francis was from Forbidden Planet, you know, the blonde in Forbidden Planet, she had a TV show called Honey West, totally gorgeous. And I was just like, you know, and people like, I would meet people like that. So it was kind of cool. And then I got in trouble with the Celebrity Center people. It got totally railroaded, kangaroo court, blamed for something other people were doing, booted out, ended up back in Austin, Texas, you know, on a bus. I had $5 to my name. I knew one person in town. And so I went and knocked on Bob's apartment door. He let me stay on his couch for a week, and then his girlfriend got tired of it. And so I walked to the University of Texas campus, went to the bulletin board, found two girls who had an apartment in a room and board place. It was one big giant room. And so you get 2 meals a day and room and board. And they said, you can take over our place. We've got 2 weeks paid for. So I'm like, okay, I got a place. And then before the month was up, I got a job delivering milk for Superior Dairy's door-to-door milk delivery, and I could pay for the thing. And so then about a year goes by, and I get a call from the Celebrity Center, and they said, that was really wrong what happened to you. We really like you. Please come back. And I owed them money because the way the stupid Scientology works is that you get to do courses and stuff for free, but then if you leave or if you're thrown out, you got to pay for them. So I owed them the grand total of $1,900 at the time,
which was a lot of money.
Yeah, it was a lot of money. You know, 74.
Right.
And so I went back out, and now I got to be a writer. They finally figured out, you know, the guy is kind of smart. He's decent with people. Let's let him write. And so I was writing letters to sell Scientology courses and books to people who are already in the central files. And sure as shit, I started selling books. I started getting people to pay for things without even coming in. And they were shocked. You know, they were just totally shocked that this was occurring because nobody had ever really done that. You know, it was all done in person. So anyway, so I was doing that for 4 years, and then I got railroaded again, blamed for stuff I wasn't doing.
I see a pattern here.
It's a little pattern. Yeah. And I was out on the street again, you know, like, yeah, thanks very much. Fuck you. Get out of here. and so I was told that my life would fall apart if I wasn't working on the staff anymore, totally committed. So in short order, I went on a TV game show, you know, answering an ad in the paper. You know, I'm really good at finding an ad and answering it and getting a result. And so I went on this TV game show called Knockout, hosted by Artie Johnson from Laugh-In. Won $14,000 in cash and prizes and a new car. And it was on NBC.
Wow.
You know, all my family back in Texas and Alabama, they were like taking off work to watch me on this show. It was before VCRs, right? And then I'm a celebrity. You know, I'm in the parking lot of a grocery store in Beverly Hills. But this time, my youngest brother was out here running this grocery store. And I'm in this parking lot of this grocery store called Jerry's. And this gold Rolls Royce pulls up. And it's Barney, what's his name, who was the black guy on Mission Impossible. Stops the car, rolls down the window, and says, "Hey, didn't I see you win that car and all that money on Knockout?" And I'm like, "Yes, you did." I'm like, holy shit, I'm made now, man. I'm
a game show celebrity. Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, so that started my writing career.
Interesting.
You know? And then suddenly then suddenly the Scientology Celebrity Center thinks I'm kind of cool after all, you know. Anyway,
and your writing career, obviously, you gave me the short version of it, but you've written a ton of stuff. I mean,
right,
everything from, I'm gonna throw up a couple of the books. These are just Idiot's Guide to Screenwriting, Writer's Guide to Hollywood, um, Charlie Sheen, Martin Sheen's Families, Making Money with Craigslist, and just so many other things. So, I mean, screenplays, but with all of it, there's a story, there's an adventure. I mean,
right,
you just went on a hell of an adventure as a writer. So
right.
share a little bit of that amazing adventure that you went on.
Well, the funny thing is the Scientology connection paid off because there were a lot of people in Scientology and in Hollywood. And once John Travolta became a big star with Saturday Night Fever, then Scientology became the thing to do for a lot of people in Hollywood. It was very interesting how that happened. So I knew a lady who was the secretary to Jack Gilardi at ICM, International Creative Management, who was a big agent at the time, married
Yeah,
to
I ran across him when I got out to Hollywood.
yeah. And across the hall was Sue Mingers, who had all these top stars like Barbara Streisand, talent agent. And so Jack's secretary, Jackie Loria, and Sue Mingers' secretary, Cindy Pearson, read a piece that I wrote about William Shakespeare being down on himself, wasn't getting anywhere as far as he was concerned in London. He was just being in the King's Men Players or whatever it was, and then he's thinking he should give up, go back home to Stratford, and this crow, this raven, lands on his open window above a pub and turns into his old friend who has left acting and has gone into the wizardry, being a wizard. And he's like, "You can't give up. You're really good. You don't understand. You can't give up." And Shakespeare's like, "Yeah, well, prove it." So the wizard friend whisked him through time to modern day New York City, and he's going to show him his influence on the culture, how it turned out. And then this girl is breaking up with her boyfriend at the time, who's kind of a dead ringer for young Shakespeare. And so the boyfriend leaves a diner in a huff. She runs into Shakespeare, and Shakespeare is like, she thinks he's fooling with her because her boyfriend is an actor, right? And she ends up sort of melding into this relationship with Shakespeare, and he gets all this inspiration for plays from people and things in New York City, right? And then at the end, it's sort of like, well, gosh, I can't really stay here, so it's like nebulous. Does he talk the boyfriend into going back and playing him and being William Shakespeare, right? And so Jackie and Cindy decided they're going to quit their jobs and produce this movie, which I thought was the dumbest thing possible, but they did. They didn't get the movie made. Later, Michael York, I ran into him, and Michael optioned it, didn't get the movie made, but Michael and his wife, Pat, had a friend who named Ed Zwick, and they had another friend named Tom Stoppard, and Sabrina Guinness, who married Tom Stoppard, and this little movie called Shakespeare in Love happened. There wasn't any trip to modern day New York City, but it was young Shakespeare struggling and coming up with play titles like Romeo and Ethel the Pirate's Daughter. So anyway, that's kind of how it started, and I had many adventures like that where I thought I was going to really break through this time, and then it would be something else. It's Hollywood. So I would go on to another, if something didn't sell after a little few attempts, and I'd just go do something else that I could sell and make money on,
I'm gonna pivot a little bit. Tell us a little bit about, one of the things in screenplay writing but it also relates to life, is this thing called The Hero's Journey.
Yeah.
And I just got it up on the screen right now. And it's, it's something the screenplay writers use to write, that journey that someone goes on. But it also has a reflection to real life, because people go on hero journey. Not everybody chooses to, not everybody gets that opportunity, but there are a lot of people who choose to go on that journey. Tell us a little bit about that. And you're obviously teaching screenwriting, writing about screenwriting. Tell us a little bit about how that relates to both screenwriting and life, and your life, because you went on a hell of a journey, to put it mildly.
Yeah. So here's a funny thing. So for the first time, I took a Tony Robbins seminar online.
Just recently. Yeah. Well,
Recently.
Obviously, we can talk about that, because I go way back, and he kind of flipped my life. It's one of the reasons why I'm in Hollywood, is because of him. But go ahead with your story.
Okay, so the second day seminar that he teaches now is all about the hero's journey.
Right.
And I was like, wow, okay. So a friend of mine turned me on to Joseph Campbell's Hero of 1,000 Faces, where the hero journey comes from, years ago. And I started applying it to screenplay structure, and it was all the rave after George Lucas credited the hero's journey. Well, Joseph Campbell, Hero of 1,000 Faces, he said he couldn't have finished writing Star Wars without it, because of all the elements it has in it, like the mentor, which is Obi-Wan Kenobi, etc. Right. At the same time, Dr. George Miller, who made the Mad Max movies in Australia, was also a devotee of the hero's journey. Right. So I used it in screenplays. It helped. And then at one point, I was trying to write a different script. I think it was a romantic comedy. And I thought, wait a minute, there's not a mentor in this movie, or is it needed? And I thought about movies like The Big Sleep, or The Maltese Falcon, and Sam Spade, and detectives. And I thought, there's no mentor in these either. So the hero's journey is not applicable to every story. It's not. However, I'd also a friend of mine was Lou Hunter, who was the co-chair of the screenwriting department at UCLA, very almost legendary. Lou was a great guy. And Lou turned me on to Aristotle's Poetics, which is, 3 acts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I knew obviously quite a bit about Shakespeare, and which is 5 acts. And then along came a writer-director I knew who made a bunch of low-budget movies named Ed Hunt. And Ed learned to invest his money, and his mentor for that was Ralph Elliott, who had a thing called the Elliott Wave, which was big in financial and investing circles for a while. And I looked at the actual structure of the Elliott Wave, and the main part of it is 5 lines up and down. And so I correlated the hero's journey, the 3-act structure, Shakespeare's 5 acts, and came up with my own thing, which I presented in a speech seminar I gave at Pepperdine University, which is on YouTube, right? And people loved it. And the person who loved it most was Chris Vogler. And he came out of the audience afterward and said, wow, you really put all these things together. Now, Chris is largely responsible for the hero's journey. He wrote a book called The Writer's Journey, which is about the hero's journey. And he was a big fan of it when, what's his name? He was DreamWorks guy, was running Disney with Eisner at
Katz?
the time. Huh? Yeah.
Jeremy Katz?
Yeah. Yeah. And Katzenberg.
Katzenberg.
Yeah. So he kept, Chris was a development guy at Disney, and he kept pounding on Katzenberg. You got to read this. You got to read this. So finally, he writes this 14-page memo explaining it all. Katzenberg said, "I want everything that we do to be run through this template, this writer's journey, hero's journey template." And the first one that they put through that template and made it conform was Aladdin.
Okay.
Which Terry Rossio and his partner wrote. And so that was such a huge hit. So then it took off even more so in Hollywood, right? So, but in the thing that I put together, I found out that, and I talk about it in my Pepperdine lecture, I found out that it really does occur to all kinds of people over and over and over, right? You start out in a normal world, you're sort of thrust into a whole different world, even if it's in the same geographical location. That's a new world. You have a mentor who sort of teaches you the ropes, or you have to learn the ropes by yourself of this whole new world. Then you reach a crucial point, which is in the middle of Act 2, and you have to do what I call a leap of faith. And if you do the leap of faith, you're not sure you're going to succeed, but you have to do it. You have to go through this turmoil, this trial. Once you've done it and completed it, you've solved an inner wound that you have, and you're capable of winning the big battle, right? And then the universe sort of tests you and says, "Oh yeah, you think you're so smart now? You think you're so tough? Okay, try this." And that's when James Bond gets captured by the villain and all kinds of movies. It's like, how in the hell is he or she going to get out of this one, right?
Well, like you said, you took that online, Tony Robbins. I share a story of my life, which is kind of fits all those things of that journey, because I met him back in the late 80s, right before the 90s. I was working in the post office, a midnight shift for 5 years as a mail handler. And I took his seminar and walked on hot coals. And he opened up that world. He was that mentor. He opened up all these new ideas for me as to what was possible if I went on the journey, right? Yeah. And so at that point, I thought, I got it. I know everything. Everything's going to be easy from here on in, right?
Yeah.
And then I quit the post office, and next thing I had no money. I had no credit cards. A drunk driver ran into my car. I had no car. I was like, everything in my world crashed. And I was now tested. Do I go forward or do I go back? A girlfriend of mine I was with her, she died of AIDS at the time. I was with her when she died. And then with $100 in my pocket, Skip, I got a ride to California, and I went on that journey to start again and try to recreate myself. And then, you overcome obstacles, and then things start getting placed in your way. So that was before anybody. And then when I read Vogler's book, I went, wow, this sounds like what I just went through here. But, but that's the thing. I mean, it's you can either do it unconsciously or consciously. For me, it was unconscious on a way. But like you said, there's that. It doesn't fit every life. It doesn't fit every story or every script. But it is it's a great thing to have as a perspective. And I think that's, what you're saying from teaching that class at Pepperdine. You combined all those things into a way to look at it from a storytelling point of view.
Yeah, well, your thing is that living courageously, that's the catch. So not everybody has the courage to go be a hero, even of their own life.
Right. Even in their own life. Exactly.
Yeah. And if you choose to do something heroic, to break out, to do something different, to not just get a job and, be nice, go to church, get your retirement, pet the grandkids on the head, that's fine for a lot of people to do that. But if you choose to do something different, you most likely will hit that pattern.
Yeah.
It's just kind of built in.
Yeah, it is. And then you get thrown all those obstacles because, if you think life's going to be easy just because you think you know everything, it doesn't work out that way. It just never does, because life throws obstacles at you of all kinds. and you still have to overcome them if you want to keep going, or you retreat. Either or, you make that choice. Are you going to retreat from it, or you're going to, find something inside you, that inner strength. And maybe, like you said, it's a mentor or someone who gives you a little extra to get you through it, but then you do,
Right. Yeah. And just like I've experienced, just as you've experienced, when you do complete it, you come away with a boon, which is a gift to the people in the normal world where you came from. It's sort of like they don't have to go through what you went through because they can learn from you, or you've killed the dragon that was terrorizing the town, like in, some of the Lord of the Rings stuff, And so you're here, you're teaching people to live courageously. You produce movies and done all these things that a lot of people dream of doing and never accomplish. And I ended up being a teacher and teaching these people. I ended it up one time with all the books I've written and the courses I did, both real life and online. I've affected positively 500,000 people.
And the lesson I hear from that was, if you you could have stayed in your smaller world where you grew up, and you would have had a different life, and you would have impacted less people, or a small amount of people maybe. But you wouldn't have had that same kind of impact if you didn't keep taking risks, if you didn't keep finding a way, living for, in someone's apartment with $100, whatever you did. Each time you found a way to keep moving forward, not knowing what was in front of you, because you didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, there was no guarantees.
Right. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I kind of feel like God picks people to, go who have the capability of getting through it, who can stay courageous, who can stay on course once they find out what the course is, and get through it and be an example to other people or help other people along the way.
So, well, I've been listening to, it's funny you say that. And I've been just recently, in the last couple of weeks, listening to this song by God and Country called These Times. And in it, there's a line where God chose us for these times. So it's like, you realize, you've been given a gift, and your gift is to give it to others. Your gift is to share what you experienced, learned, and give it back to make a difference in other people, so you can encourage them or inspire them to be greater than they are, to do what they need to do in their life. So that's the gift we've been given, to be where we are at this point in our life.
Yeah, I said earlier that I'd never backed off from talking to people whenever I thought I should. There's only a few examples. Merle Haggard started a nightclub one time to compete with the Palomino in North Hollywood. And so I was an editor of an entertainment magazine at the time. So I went out to cover it. Every country star you could think of who was in California was there. And so I walk in, and as I walk in, there's this round booth where this couple is sitting and kind of holding court with all these other people. And it's Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. And I was talk about a hero. Roy was my hero. Him and Gene Autry were my hero growing up as a little kid, and watching them on TV and their movies and stuff. And I just couldn't talk to them. I couldn't bring myself to talk to Roy and Dale. This was like royalty of the universe, So, but in other instances, I've run into these people that are legendary. One time I jumped out of my convertible in Beverly Hills. I was going to have breakfast at Nate and Al's, and I just did a ta-da like that. Nobody was watching. I was just farting around. I jumped out of it, and I hear this clapping like this, and I turn around and look up, and this quiet little man walks up very gracefully and says, "That was very funny." And I said, "Well, thank you, Mr. Astaire." And it was Fred Astaire,
Wow.
And I just talked to him for a minute or two, and then he said, "See you later," and walked on. And I was like, "Oh my God," one time I was in New York researching the Shakespeare play that I told you about, that story, and a friend of mine lived in this building where Tennessee Williams had an apartment. So I went and knocked on his door and said, can I interview you for this theater magazine a friend of mine ran back in Los Angeles? He said, yeah, for sure. So, if you are courageous, you don't necessarily have to set out to be a hero, but if you are courageous and you're just your genuine self, you can accomplish so much more in life that people think they're not capable of accomplishing.
100%. One of the things, and there's so much to cover, and I'm kind of getting a little bit that I'm not going to get all of it into this hour, but that's okay. I know one of the things that you've been doing, and I've been a follower reading your stuff because one, I think your writing is excellent and your storytelling, but you have a Substack newsletter, as I do, but yours is a lot. You're a writer. I just put information up there, but this is your one of the things called Chasing Mark Twain, and it's on Substack. I'll put up the link for people, and it just tells a little bit of a journey, your story, that is just fascinating. I mean, I'm just, because the amount of people you've come across and who you've got involved both in Scientology, out of Scientology, in Hollywood, out of Hollywood, just the whole range of experiences you have going on that journey. You share that on your Substack, and I recommend that people read it, subscribe to it, check out. And I know you're going to share some more stuff going forward with it. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that was something that I was not courageous about writing for the longest time. And then Lisa Marie Presley, who I knew, died unexpectedly. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I won't live forever. I better tell this story, And the reason I did not write it for a long time was because I thought people would think I was just nuts. Because on my spiritual journey in 1973, I was reading all these books about religion and stuff, and Edgar Cayce. And I
read all his stuff too. Yeah.
Yeah. So suddenly I realized why I would think I'd lived before and why I'd see things and think I've been here. I've done this, right? So I came across this book called Mr. Clemens and Mark Twain by Justin Kaplan. And it was all about Twain's life. And as I read it, I started realizing that I knew what would happen next, even though I had not read about Twain before, right? And I don't know if I even read Huck Finn at that time, maybe Tom Sawyer. And so instead of solving the religion problem of the world, I thought, I want to have a family like that. And I thought, maybe I was him. And I want to find the woman he was married to. And like she's reincarnated like I am, right? And then I thought, well, maybe this is just crazy. And then one day, this is a real thing that happened. And it's hard to convince people that it happened unless they've had something similar happen. I was alone in the house. It was sunset. I was looking for an aspirin. I had a headache. And I took one aspirin, and it was the only drug of any kind I had for a year, not even a beer. I don't think I even had a beer. And I I closed the medicine cabinet door, mirrored door, and I looked in the mirror, and it was Mark Twain's face staring back at me. Not the white-haired Mark Twain that so many people know, but the younger Sam Clemens, right? And so then I was like, oh boy. And then I had relatives out from Texas, and they were berating me about I'm wasting my life. You're so smart. You can be a doctor or a lawyer and da 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 da. And I said, no, I'm going to be a writer, just like I always thought I'd be a writer. Well, what makes you think you could be a writer? And I said, well, people like these stories I've written, and I've been a writer before. What do you mean before? And my aunt goes, don't tell me you think you were Shakespeare. And I said, no, I think I was Mark Twain. and so everybody's jaw went, like that. And then my aunt said, well, what are you going to do to live up to it? And I'm like, what? So anyway, then I got into Scientology. I did some early auditing, and the scene came to me early on of Sam Clemens with his family, young family, in an autumn carnival atmosphere, walking around. And this is nothing I'd seen on TV, nothing I'd seen in pictures, but it was just like being in the movie. So after that, I was like, holy moly. And then I would run into people who had similar things in the Scientology thing, right? So finally, put all that behind me. I don't give a damn about that. I'm just going to try to, I'm just doing my life. It's a pain in the ass to think you had been somebody famous and you got to compete with yourself, and if you mention it, people will think you're nuts, and rightly so, I guess. But then in 1989, I was going to play Harry Chapin, Cats in the Cradle and, Taxi, all that stuff, in the movie of his life. And I looked almost exactly like Harry at that time. And I went to New York to meet the producer. He said, you got the part that night. And that night, this girl walked into this theater, and we just kept staring at each other. And the next day I went up to Stockbridge, Massachusetts, because I was going to do a sequel to Alice's Restaurant with Arlo Guthrie. And so I was flying high, and then I got back and I called this girl in New York City, and I said, so tell me about yourself. You're a model. She said, yeah, part-time. I'm a Ford model. I work on Wall Street. And I said, what do you do in your spare time? Oh, you'll think I'm crazy. What do you mean I'll think you're crazy? She said, I go look for books. And I said, well, okay. What kind of books? She said, well, there's one particular author. I've got a poster of him on my wall. And I said, oh, who? And she goes, no, you'll think I'm crazy. And I said, no, I won't think you're crazy. Hell, I'm in Scientology. And so she said, Mark Twain. And I said, why Mark Twain? She says, I think I used to be married to him.
Huh.
So 6 months later, we're married. The Arlo movie didn't happen. The Harry Chapin movie didn't happen, but we have 2 kids, and she got me out of Scientology.
And this is where, everybody, I recommend check out your Substack pages and subscribe to it, because the story is fascinating. And like you said, it's so, if you don't know any of that stuff, Hollywood or Scientology, it's going to be really hard to understand how the journey you went on. But right. Even for me on the show, it was fascinating. And so I recommend everybody to definitely check it out. Now, I was going to go down this road with you of Scientology, and I want to, because I've always been fascinated by cults for a lot of different reasons. I read about all kinds of different things like Scientology. I was never a member myself. The closest I came was being a member of, I'll call it a semi-cult, being a communist. So we'll call that a semi-cult, right? So
big semi-cult.
Yeah, it didn't make it all the way to a full cult, but it was, there was moments. So, understand, and I got out of that, obviously. And so, or at least not obviously, but I got out of it. And so we kind of went on different journeys. So I really would love to, I think what we need to do is do a show on cults, talking about Scientology, talking about political cults, religious cults, and just, how it affects why people joined them, what they get potentially good out of it, but what's the negative side. And then in your case, your journey out of the cult. But I'd love to go into that. But I think we couldn't do it in 5 minutes. No. I don't think that's fair to the topic or fair to what the story would be. It'd be like going to watch a feature film and you leave after 5 minutes. You didn't get it.
Well, I can tell you real quickly, the main thing about Scientology in Hollywood is that it's like I said with John Travolta, at a certain point, it became smart, particularly if you're an actor, to get involved with Scientology because of the networking. You had top casting directors like Lisa London. who were Scientologists, and those guys would help each other out, and it had a lot to do.
Acting coaches, like
Yes.
what's that famous acting coach?
Milton Gatsalis, Beverly Hills Playhouse. Yeah, it's a fascinating story. Yeah.
So for a lot of people, the reason to join was I guess we would call it opportunism, to
Yes.
to move to forward their careers, to be able to network and connect with people, and it would open up doors that they couldn't figure out how to open up otherwise.
Right.
So there was the true believers, the people who really believed, and then there was the other people who were, it was a stepping stone, and they took advantage of it, right? But that's fascinating too, because you're right. At some point, it became the thing to do for Hollywood actors and creatives in Hollywood, and it had its heyday when it was really going strong, and then it started to decline. And that's a fascinating story as well. I'd just love us to do a show just on that, just to get into all of that, because your perspective is from an insider, mine is from an outsider.
Yeah, we should do that, because nobody's really told the story of why those people got in and why it was such a community for them and how it was manipulated. Right. Even Leah Remini and all her stuff, she still hadn't covered that. Right. Paul Haggis was a friend of mine, Going Clear, still didn't cover that.
Interesting.
So there's a whole story there to be told. Absolutely.
Well, if you're open to doing it, I'd love to do an hour, because I'd love to explore it. Like I said, because it fascinates me how people both, allow themselves to give up their creative thinking, give up their free thinking, and follow leaders blindly, even when it's not in their interest anymore, when it starts to go against their own personal interests, and they still stay caught up in the belief in the system, rather than having the courage or the thinking to be able to say no and step away. So
and it covers. We could cover also EST, which was an offshoot of Scientology. Ted Danson, people like that. It was.
And there's a few other ones now that are even crazier. That are just out there. There was that one, the one about the cloning cult I just read about. They just did a Netflix thing about this French guy, and it was basically supposedly he had already learned how to clone people, and it was once again a sex cult. He's using it to get all these women to go to sleep with him. And it's fascinating how people are manipulated, but I'd love to have that conversation. But we have a few minutes more. I want to just talk about some of the other things that you might want to share. We're in Hollywood. I got to throw this up just because it's fun. And I feel bad if I didn't. It is the Super Bowl. So I kind of came up with the fact that we need commercials, right? Because the halftime, it's all about commercials. So this is the first one. I think, that's sponsoring our show is Pfizer. Oh, wait, I just canceled that one. Forget that. They're gone. And here's our second commercial. Oh, wait, I just canceled that one too. All right. So I guess we got no commercials. Sorry about that, folks. But I had to do that just in honor of Super Bowl and the commercials, man. And my two favorite ones, Budweiser Light and Pfizer. But back to being serious, some of the journey, going forward for you. I know you want to write a memoir, and you're working on that. I think, the Substack was a step in that direction for you. Tell us a little bit about the future. What else are you aiming to do, and what do you want to do going forward?
Well, I ghostwrite things for people. There's, I did the first draft of a famous conservative political figure in California, Larry Elder. I didn't say that. And and I do other stuff. I'm talking with some other people about things. I'm going to write the second half of the Chasing Mark Twain thing.
I got to try and get Larry on my show, by the way. I've reached out to him a couple of times. We talked, but we haven't been. He's still being resistant. So we got to get him. I got to get him on my show.
I'll plug it for you.
Sounds good.
Yeah, he'll do it. He needs to. One thing I want to do with Larry Elder is I want to do a play from his Dear Father, Dear Son.
Yeah, it's an excellent book.
Yeah, and he he's got Ari Emanuel represents Denzel, and so he was trying to get Denzel to do a movie. I said, do a play, Larry, do a play, and get Denzel to do it. It'll be a hit on Broadway. Then you'll make the movie.
Wow, so that's a great idea.
Right, and so he didn't go for that. He was swinging for the home run. Then he told me I could write the play if I wanted to. And I said, well, maybe I will. Nobody's paying me, but so anyway, so going forward, I'd like to do something like that. I'm going to tell the second half of the Twain thing with how the marriage broke up, dealing with kids, and even more Twain stuff that came up along the way, dreams, spiritual stuff, that. And then I've got a novel I'm rewriting that was going to be published years ago. And so I'm taking the whole thing and I'm making it very current Hollywood, and it's called Hollywood Must Die.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a thriller story, and it's real. It's kind of a Michael Connelly, somebody like that. So I'm trying to get that done, and then I'm just making a living editing books for people, ghostwriting things when they need them, like that. And I've got a couple of screenplays sort of bouncing around out there, same old life.
And I'm just going to share this thing that I saw on one of your pages somewhere, that you talked about. It was you had been working on a book with a billionaire, and you had this phrase that you mentioned, that thoughts lead to actions, lead to habits, habits form character, and your character is your fate. And then you said you realized that this could be engineered to handle problems that when you seem stuck. So if anybody wanted to know more about that, to contact you as well. I just thought that was an interesting comment, because it's so true. It starts with our thoughts, and then we take actions. And then, if you keep doing it consistently, you build habits. As a writer, you built habits as a writer. You got better as a writer because you had those habits of writing. And that's how we build character, and we become who we are. And that creates your identity. So I just thought that was an interesting comment from you to share with people.
Yeah, I will help anybody with that. I did it. I was on a 4-hour phone call, WhatsApp, with a lady in Finland today, and I brought it up with her. It really works. I've done it so much. I've done it with myself. When you can get down to the basic thought that got you started on a journey that might have been wrong, and you back it down, and you can find out where the whole thing started, despite all the activities and everything you went through. When you pinpoint that, the problem goes away. It just goes away, and it's like cleaning the house and enjoying it again. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, no, I noticed that. I thought it was a good comment from you. I wanted to share that with everyone. Anything else you would like to leave us with? And then I'll wrap this up, and then we will schedule an hour to come on and just have a great conversation about cults and the whole mindsets that lead to it.
Yeah, I'm available for anybody that needs help with writing, of anything. Feel free to get in touch with me, skippress.com. I've been paying off debts the last few years, and I've almost got them all paid off. And then once I have, then I'm going to be full-fledged and just doing my own stuff, And so, even though it's tough economic times, I've been able to get through it and keep going, so it's, but I feel like my best writing has not yet been out there. So I feel like I'm starting to get that out there, odd as that might sound.
Well, it's funny, odd as it might sound, but at the same time, it just shows that, the journey keeps continuing for you, and you still have that sense of, where you are in this life. No matter how long of a life you've lived, you still have that adventurous life. You still have that, you're going to keep creating as a creator, and you're going to, surpass what you've done so far. And I think that's just a great way for people to live a life, to live a courageous life, and to just live life, to pursue it with that kind of attitude like you have right now.
Well, look at our hero, Clint Eastwood. He's 93 now, and he's still making movies, man.
I know. Well, I say I want to be shooting baskets at 95 on the basketball court. So, if Clint can do it, I'm going to follow that path too. Why not? Right?
Yeah, you'll probably get there, because look, they've got so many things they're coming up with all the time. There's so many people living to be 100 these days. It's amazing. It's amazing. So no matter how old you are, you got to just do it.
Well, once again, Skip, thank you for taking the time. Thanks you for sharing your journey. If everybody wants to check you out, Skip Press on Substack and then skippress.com on your website, correct? So
Yeah.
if they want to
Yeah.
connect with you, go to both of those sites. Look forward in the future. We're going to have a great conversation about cults. If you're going to get the insides and the outsides of what that life is like. And I hope you join us then. So Skip, have a great one. I'm going to close us out and we'll talk soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. It's been great.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
So everyone, once again, I hope the show today with Skip inspired you with his adventurous life and his creative life and his continuing adventures. And if you haven't seen the previous 64 podcasts with some of my amazing, courageous friends, you can check them out on YouTube, my channel, Live Courageously. And please, if you get a chance, do what I'm about to ask you to do. It'd be fun. Do this. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And once again, I'll see you next Sunday and every Sunday after that on all these places: Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. And you can also listen on Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and iTunes. Have a great one.